Dr. Daniel Kouma, who holds a PhD in archaeology from the University of Toulouse-Jean Jaurès in France. Daniel Kouma is a lecturer in the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies, the University of Ghana in Legon. He's an archaeologist, cultural heritage specialist, and museum studies expert. His research interests focuses on urbanism, Iron Age societies, digital heritage and archaeology, cultural resource management and restitution. He's the founding curator of the Bego Community Museum in the Bono region of Ghana. He's also the principal investigator of the Bego Area Archaeological Project, the Archaeology of Gold and the Gold Trade Project in Ghana, and Digital Heritage Project at the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies at the University of Ghana. Daniel is currently a postdoc fellow at the project Material Migration, Mamluk Metalwork Across Afro-Eurasia. In June 2024, he was a visiting scholar at the Department of Archaeology at the University of York. He's also a fellow of the African Cultural Heritage Program on Restitution, and he was one of 50 people to be selected to participate in this year's Museums Lab program, which took place in Europe and Africa from June to December 2024. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this very exciting workshop. All right, so I'll be doing a presentation titled Bego, Ghana, and West Africa's Connection with the Islamic World. Now, when we talk about West Africa's connection to Islam, usually the emphasis has been on North Africa and then some part of the desert areas. However, though we are aware that the Islamic influence goes down into the forest area of West Africa, however, in terms of research, not much has been done. The likes of Timothy Inso, Sam Nixon, and quite a number of people have done some work. However, we feel that that aspect of West Africa has really not been explored. Though we know West Africa has a long history of Islamic activities dating to about 1,000 years. And then West Africa also has seen the development of wide-ranging cultural networks, powerful Islamic dynasties, and varied architectural and material cultural tradition. Now, West Africa represents one of the untapped zones of Islamic archaeology, as I just mentioned earlier. Now, this is a map basically showing some of the towns in West Africa, or Africa in general, the Sahara, all the way to Sub-Saharan Africa, where you have that influence of Islamic activities. Now, the focus of my work would be around Bego, and then also a site in Nigeria known as Drobi Takushe. It's a part of the project we have been working on the Mamluk object. Now, when I know I don't really want to talk much about the history of the trans-Saharan trade, because I know Fauvel and the rest previously would have done that. But it's important for us to note that when we talk of the trans-Saharan trade, particularly with interaction with the Islamic traders, we know that these two mines, the Bambouk mines and then the Bura mines, were very important mines that propelled the trans-Saharan trade. However, after the collapse or the over-exploitation of these mines, after the exploitation of these mines, we know that the trade came down into the forest areas, particularly where you have the Akan gold, which was exploited. So Bego was one of the important towns where you had traders coming in all the way from Timbuktu through to Guinea, all the way to Bego, because it was a market center which was noted for the gold trade. Okay, so Bego importance can also be seen. Now, one of the important aspects of the West Africa's connection with Islam has to do with the architectural features that have been left behind. One of them has to do with particularly the Islamic mosques that have been built, littered all around. So you have quite a number of them. As you are aware, in recent times, in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, most of these Islamic mosques have been engraved as part of the World UNESCO Heritage Site. Now you have quite a number of them from Kong to Bonduku all the way. Now, fortunately, just the previous week, I was part of a research. Professor Rio Silverman and I did a survey of some of the mosques in the Ivory Coast region, which is close to the Bego area. So there are quite a number of them. Some of them are in a very good shape. Some too are deteriorating because they are made from mud. So that is an important legacy. We are aware of the famous Great Mosque of Djinni in Mali. Then you also have the Bobo Dalassou Mosque, which is in Burkina Faso. This is just a few. And then you also have the Larabanga Mosque, which is in Ghana. Then you have, this was the site, Sorobanga Mosque, that Professor Rio Silverman and I just visited in the previous week. Then you also have the Bondo Mosque. Now, the interesting thing, based on the survey, we noticed that some of these mosques are deteriorating. Some of the communities are doing their best, particularly with this one. You can see that the local people are still trying their best to preserve it. In other places, the community have just given up on the structures, and the best they could do is to put up a new mosque, which is close to it. So these are some of the legacies when it comes to West Africa's connection to the Islamic world. Then we are aware of the numerous Arabic manuscripts that are found in places like Timbuktu and so on, in Bego area and so on and so forth. And now most of them date from about the 15th century all the way to the 19th century. And then these are very valuable materials which gives us the history and the activities that took place during the period. Now, I would now turn my focus to Bego, which is one of the areas that we are working. Now, Bego was an important town dating from about the 11th century to the 18th century. Now, it was a cosmopolitan town and a market center which linked the Akan forest gold, cola, ivory producing areas, particularly to Djinni in Mali. Now, it's currently located in the central part of Ghana, as you can see where it's located. And you can see the link from Timbuktu all the way to the Bego area. Now, there are quite a number of Arabic manuscripts that have been written about this so-called Bego area. The authenticity, particularly in terms of the period they were written, we know most of them date to about the mid-17th century, all the way to the 19th century. But clearly, particularly, we have the Tariq al-Sudan, you also have the Kutub Gunja, and so on, which talks about the importance of Bego in terms of trade to places like Djinni, how it supplied goods to Djinni, and then also talks about the invasion of Bego from Djinni by two princes for failing to supply or maintain the goods supply to Mali. Now, this is very important and key because clearly talks about the importance of the Bego area. So we've already spoken about that. Now, due to the previous research that was done in terms of the Arabic and then archaeological survey, quite a number of people tried to look for this Bego site to see where Bego was located. Is it possible to excavate? Now, so there was this argument. Some believe Bego was located in Bonduku in Ivory Coast. Others also argue that it was around Banda. Then you also have those who believe that Bego was a wider area which covered several kilometers. Now, the likes of Ivor Works and so on and so forth try to do a lot of work on this particular site. Now, from 1970 to 1979, you have Merrick Posnanski who worked on the site. The West African Trade Project was established. They did excavation survey and they found various quarters. This is the Cremo Quarter, the area where they believe Mandi traders from from Mali settled. And then you have various quarters there. The excavation revealed quite a number of things. So for me, as an archaeologist who is interested in a bit of Islamic studies, I was really, is it possible for us to see some of the materials, particularly that support the Mamluk influence in the area? So as I mentioned, we'll be looking at the Bego area and also the Drobi Takushe site in northern Nigeria. Now, as part of my work, I had to go into Story to search for materials, particularly as part of the work. If Bego was an urban center, the cultural material should be able to support that. Now, interestingly, there were other materials that were found during the excavations in the 1970s. You are finding carnelian beads. We know where carnelian beads usually come from. You find beads that come all the way from the Mediterranean. Then you also find an 18th century Chinese porcelain in the forest area. So this is the storage materials that were excavated in the 1970s from the Bego area. Over 1,000 smoking pipes, tobacco smoking pipes were in storage. All right, so all these, to some extent, gives us an idea of what to expect in terms of the material culture. Then also, as part of the oral account and then ethnographic research, it was also found out in a community which is very close to the Bego area, where you find Mamluk, 14th century Mamluk brass objects, brass bow actually. Most of them have taken on new meanings. So you can see Kofik inscriptions on them. Now, in this community, which is close to the Bego area, the local people have deified this particular object, where periodically the pour libations and rituals are performed. So you can see a priest who is offering prayers to these particular objects. So it means that these objects have taken on new meanings. Then you also have in another town where you have a huge Mamluk object, okay, also dating to the 17th century at Atebubu. And this was a caretaker. She was usually the person who took care of this. So it's interesting how you see objects that are from the Islamic world coming all the way as a result of trade and then taking up new meaning. The unfortunate thing about these objects particularly is that most of them they are not there as we speak at the moment. So you have, the last time we went, we noticed that we heard that they've been sold to scrap dealers. So we have a lot of these scrap dealers coming in from North Africa because the local people do not really know the value. They just take them away. Then also, as part of the work that I did, I excavated one of the Bego sites. Now, it was a 2x10 excavation that we did. The radiocarbon dates early 14th century dates, 2 dates actually. Now, there were several objects that were found. There are 2 Islamic beads, particularly the Islamic eye bead, okay, the Nazar, okay, dating to about 13th century to 15th century. Then for us also, it's important because in the forest areas, once you find the tooth of a horse, clearly talks about that Islamic influence because we know horses are not indigenous to this part of West Africa. All right, then based on the cultural material analysis, we are beginning to see some sort of connection in terms of the Mamluk influence on some of the cultural material. So you have quite a number of them. We have these chalices, okay, so these are chalices that have been found in some part of Ghana, in the Shire area, on the coast, and then also some part of the Bego area. Now, locally, in the Shire area, these objects are associated with the use of ritualized activities for the veneration, male circumcision, and then also rites of passage for young girls. And then based on that, we are also seeing the similarities. When you look at some of these Mamluk objects, you see similarities in terms of these object. These were from the excavations we did in 2000, and then also other cultural materials from the area. And when you also look at the ceramics, we begin to see that you have local potters that design some of these objects to look similar to some of these Islamic objects. So you have, these are some of the bowls, and you can see the similarities in terms of that. And then also, there are what we call the design painted pottery, where you have geometric and then linear painted designs on some of these pottery. Now, most of them date to about the 11th century, and these were also from the excavations that we conducted. Now, in terms of the material, particularly with the metal object, now, it's interesting for us to note that in West Africa, particularly Ghana, there's no evidence of copper mining. However, Ghana has one of the largest collection of the making of brass objects. Now, it's interesting. Most of these brass objects, as we are aware, came from North Africa. And you can see how the local people using these brass objects to produce things that depict things in their environment. Most of these objects are found in museums in various parts of the world. Now, these are metal objects from Mamluk areas which were remodeled using the C-Purdue method, for example. And the interesting thing we also notice is the kudos, which are what we call the containers, brass containers. And these, in some Mamluk objects, you see the similarities. However, locally, these were used for the storage of various things, sometimes shea butter. In other instances, you also have instances where some of them were used for keeping of treasures. Now, we see the similarities because this clearly shows that sort of influence of this. Then also, as part of our work, for me, I've always been fascinated by the fact that as an archaeologist, we read that gold was one of the main things that was traded. However, in terms of the material evidence to support, the excavations we conducted as part of the work we've been doing in Bego, for the first time, produced particles of gold in gold crucibles. Now, the Bego area in storage, we find a lot of gold crucibles. This was one of the ones we excavated. And for the first time, we are finding gold particles in them, which clearly supports the whole gold trade activity in the area. Then, in the area of Nigeria, the Drobi Takushe site, this is a 13th to 14th century site, which was a burial of royals in that particular area, indigenous royal people. Now, the site has been worked on in the early 20th century all the way to 2007. Now, the excavation revealed quite some interesting objects. We are finding a Mamluk object that was buried with the local chief that was there. So you find the skeletal remains, you find the objects, and so on and so forth. Now, this is where the site is located, and you can clearly see the Arabic inscription on this particular object. Now, so as a way of conclusion, my reflections, I actually feel that the role of this Islamic object or Mamluk object played an important role in West Africa. Now, most of these objects, the ones that have survived, have taken on new meanings, because in some of these communities, the people do not really have any connection with Islam. However, they have deified this object and they've taken on new meanings. Then we also believe that the metalworks, particularly the Mamluk metalworks, are endangered. As I mentioned, you have instances where these objects are being sold and being taken up by people who, I feel, for financial gains, want to acquire this object. So these objects in West Africa are endangered. Then finally, I also feel that there's a need for more research to be conducted in Islamic archaeology in the forest areas of West Africa, because there are quite a number of sites in West Africa that have not been touched. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. Any questions, comments? Yes.
Thank you very much for the lecture. I have a question which has to do with, I guess, your work both as an archaeologist and a culture preservation person. As you probably know, or may have experienced if you, Israel is one of the countries which is pretty much archaeologically obsessed. And I was wondering, in West Africa in general, and Ghana in specific, what is the place that something like archaeology takes in the national imagination? Because when you talk about people coming and buying stuff and selling it for scrap metal, you know, I just wonder, is there, because I know, you know, when you go much further in history, then, you know, there are lots of places to visit that are connected to the slave trade and things like that. But the sort of work that you do, is there a cultural national appreciation of this?
Thanks for that question. Unfortunately, that is not the case, where you have instances where archaeologists constantly are battling with government officials, policymakers on the importance and relevance of heritage and archaeology. So currently, as we speak, even in the laws of Ghana, you could have road construction projects and no archaeologists will be asked to do a survey, and instances where the whole site is destroyed. So most people, particularly lawmakers in Ghana, don't really see the relevance of archaeology. So constantly, we as archaeologists will have to be educating community people, talking to them about the relevance, and then archaeologists will come. But I think sometimes it's slow. That process is slow. So most people don't really see the relevance. Okay, you have instances where you even have small-scale miners destroying archaeological sites because they are in search of minerals like gold. So even if they chance upon skeletal remains, they don't really care, because for them it's not. So it's not like probably in Israel or probably in the Middle East or in Europe, where archaeology is part of the national drive. So unfortunately, that is not the case. However, there are efforts. We are making efforts with lawmakers as we speak, where we hope in the next few years it will be the government to take it serious. It's not only unique to Ghana. In Nigeria, in Ivory Coast, you know, that is the same issue. All right.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for this interesting talk. I'm just curious to know the techniques that you are employing to understand the provenance of these materials. Is it always from inscriptions, if they do carry, or do you have any other technique to identify materials that are actually from Mamluk and from elsewhere? Because this Mamluk area, the Maghreb, is a transition point in most of the cases. Thank you.
Okay, so there are parameters actually to be able to determine. Now, one has to do with the Arabic sources, and then also in terms of the communities, where you have instances where some communities have a strong oral traditions that have been kept over the years. All right, so, and then you also have instances where art history is also employed. All right, so you go to art museums where you see these objects. So obviously, you know where they are replicas. Most of these objects, you have some of them in Italy, in other places where you see the same object in the art museums. All right, so once you excavate and you find them, it's easy for you to make the connection. However, you also have sources from the Arabic manuscripts that also determines some of these issues. All right, thank you.
thank you very much for a very rich talk and presentation. I wanted to ask something on the iconography.
Okay.
Because you showed a few vessels, not
Okay.
the geometric one, but
Okay.
and I wanted to ask whether, I mean, it relates to the Catalan map actually, depicting the king, right? So not this one, previous. Yeah, that was it.
This one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So about the iconographic pattern,
Yeah.
because we haven't discussed this until now.
Yeah.
But it relates to, I mean, did you research on this? How iconography is like moving and the motives, etc.,
Exactly.
etc., and it relates also to the map. I mean, the depiction of the king of Ghana in the center. So we know that it's a Catalan map, but I mean, it's based on something. Can we know?
Yeah. So in terms of the iconography, there are if I'm not, there are millions of these, particularly these Akan brass weight objects. Now, in the iconography, some scholars who have worked on them, you notice they have what we call some that are geometric, and some also have influence of Islamic. For example, some of them were used as gold weights, for example, and you see the connection between Islamic gold weights. Okay, you see geometric gold weights, you see pyramids. There are some that were designed as pyramids. All right, so if you see somebody who is an artist in the forest area of Ghana and is making an object in the form of a pyramid, the question is, has the person been to, you understand? So I think it's a mix of various traditions. It's a mix of traders' accounts. It's a mix of interaction of various things for these iconographic. Some of them also tell proverbs, tells they embody the history, the environment, talks about so many things. And so there are actually quite a number of them, and it will be difficult to disclose its entirety in this just short period. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Daniel. You most of these Mamluk vessels that have been documented in Ghana by Silverman and then by yourself, etc., are being used by the local populations. Okay, they have been continuously in use in these societies since the time these objects arrived, sometime in the 14th century or post 14th century. Okay. You mentioned, or maybe I'm wrong, you mentioned an archaeological site in Ghana, right?
Yes.
Where such an object came to light recently, or am I wrong? Or
no, that was from ethnographic research.
Okay.
This one.
So not a single of these objects came.
This came from archaeological site, but they were found on surface. This particular one was found on the surface of an archaeological site, unlike the site in Nigeria which was excavated. Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
that was my point. Yes. The
yes.
only site, the only place, I mean, the only of these objects who comes from an in situ archaeological site is Gobekli Tepe in Nigeria.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I had a question about these very objects, more of an anthropological question, actually. So these objects are at some point endowed with some kind of a ritual function, and then they're being taken away or sold. Do the people then transfer their worship or their veneration to other objects, and if so, what are they?
Okay, so usually when it comes to object vinification, it depends on various factors. Usually, sometimes one of the reasons why these objects sometimes are sold, or probably relevance is not given to it probably 30 or 40 years ago, when you have the caretaker, if the caretaker passes on or dies, then nobody really takes interest in it. So once the person who feels this must be venerated, the person dies, then people just don't, they see it as a mere object. Then it gets to a point the new generation feels it should be discarded or be, all right. So usually, but most communities determine whatever they want to venerate. It's not like, there are some people probably has some historical background or they feel it has some potency, then they would want to venerate that particular object. It depends on community to community. Right, thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Okay, then please join me in thanking Daniel and also Sarah, both of them, for a very rich session.